Welcome back. John Ford, the Warlock. Film directors primarily are warlocks because they create illusions, or we might say propaganda. Why? So you don't know what really happened. You don't know what's happening, and you won't know what's happening because you're not able to think correctly. So we're looking at this documentary. Remember, he promised to recreate it at the beginning of the documentary. So back to John Ford. I already talked a little bit about the idea of the 007, which is the pipe and the two eyes, which represents the cane, and the two balls, the two-ball cane. Now I like this little flyer here. It talks about the Battle of Midway, real history. And I did have a channel called Reel, R-E-A-L, or Reel, R-E-E-L. But I took it down because I was so overwhelmed with the vast amount of videos I have created. And I thought I'm just overdosing viewers and myself on videos. So I took down that particular channel. But Ford, John Ford, the filmmaker, was elevated to the position of lieutenant, and he would be authorized to create the film Battle of Midway. Well, he's going to capture it on film, all these planes up in the air shooting at each other and everything like that. So basically the only thing that happened at Midway was John Ford created a false reality that airplanes were up in the air shooting at each other and dropping bombs on each other's ships and things like that. It was just a place to film. Now, I also did a video on Iwo Jima. They select obscure locations so that nobody will ever be able to confirm or even deny anything because they're in some obscure location. So the same with this film, he'll do the Battle of Midway. It's just another propaganda piece. Alright, so we're going to get back to our original film that we've been looking at, and that is December 7th, 1941, with film director Warlock John Ford, who will create the reality in the minds of many Americans of a terrible war with terrible losses.
Yet virtually overnight, the island scene changed. War had come to America's tropical suburb. The Axis brand of war. A stab in the back Sunday morning. The din of the last bomb had barely faded when Governor Poindexter proclaimed martial law for the civilian population.
Okay, martial law. Now, it actually was already proclaimed in the United States, but at the time, Hawaii is not under, not a statehood. But if you take the word law, make it backwards, W-A-L, Wall, Mart, and drop the I-L, you have martial law. Now people, you don't realize this maybe, but No matter what state you live in the United States or called America, it's under martial law. And it's been under martial law since 1933. Third month, the third, or March the 9th, 1933. And that is when any possibility of any type of valid government went bankrupt. And basically speaking, everything came under the rule of military. And that's why you have your flags in the courthouse have the fringes on them, because everything goes back to England. Because the United States is just simply a corporation under martial. The land is under martial law, and the origin of all authority is basically England. And that's why the fringes on the flag in the courthouse, because it's admiralty law, meaning going back to England. And England's laws basically go back to canon law. By canon law, I mean the Latin laws of the corrupt Roman Catholic Church. Well, you didn't ask for all that, but anyhow, this martial law stuff. Now imagine, they've just been bombed, supposedly, and now the people that live there are going to come under oppression. It's about oppressing the people. It's about making sure nobody speaks out and tells the whole world, nothing happened here. Nothing! Except for a controlled demolition on the USS Arizona, and some smoke bombs, and maybe a couple fires lit, and maybe somebody shooting their rifle in the air. But that's why the martial law existed, to silence the population. Bet you never thought of that.
Population. Windows were taped in order to reduce the dangers from flying glass. Vital installations were camouflaged and protected by sandbags and barbed wire. Barbed wire, mountains of it, strung along every foot of Oahu's colorful coasts, strung across its highways, around its schools and its public buildings.
So why do you think the barbed wire is there? Oh, I know, you think it's to protect them from Japanese invading. No, sorry to tell you, it's the opposite. It's to keep the people under control. Wait till you see what they do to the children. You're going to see some parallels, by the way, as to what is currently, or was currently, and might again be imitated again with our children in school systems here in America. So watch and see the oppression that comes to the population. The oppression that comes to the population. So they keep their mouths shut.
Everywhere the earth was tunneled to provide shelter from shrapnel and strafing. Public squares, parks, and playgrounds were uprooted. Sturdy concrete shelters were built and distributed throughout the city. An efficient air raid warning system was put into operation, and for the first time in history, American school children were brought face to face with the grim reality of war.
Okay, now the so-called air raid system is simply your Pavlovian, the bell rings, and the dogs respond. The bell rings, and the dogs respond. There's no danger to anyone, but the children are to be frightened beyond measure.
Even tiny little tots, confused and bewildered, were taught to march into zigzag trenches. How difficult to convey to them the why or wherefore of this strange game. Still more difficult to explain the need for deep...
Notice he said this strange game. And that's exactly what it is. It's a game played on people's minds. Now think about what they're doing right here, and think about what recently has occurred in school systems throughout the United States and maybe throughout the world. It's no different. It's no different.
These monstrous looking things, but the fathers and mothers of Hawaii did. For this war is a war of survival, a people's war. Even a little people's war, yes? Your bombs, Mr. Tojo?
No, I think I did a video a while back and I called it the Little People's War, and I probably included this particular cut of film. Now the other thing that they're going to do is to try to wipe out the Japanese culture and make everybody hate the Japanese. Now this will be in preparation for what will happen in about 1942 on the West Coast, where they will issue the internment proclamation of the president to round up all the Japanese and steal their possessions and take hold of their businesses and wipe them out, put them in camps and say there's a danger because they're Japanese. Now I also did some work on the film 1941 with John Belushi, and that particular film really mocks the whole thing about the confusion on the West Coast in California, and supposedly there was a submarine that came out and bombed one of the oil plants, oil factories out there in California, and it was all a bunch of gibberish. And Belushi and characters had a blast making that film called 1941. But you know what the sad truth is? This was theft and the destruction of people's lives because they were of Japanese heritage. Now I know everybody says, oh, they could have been spies, they could have been enemies. Well, guess what? It should have been done to the Germans in the United States. It should have been done to the Italians. But it wasn't, was it? Why? Because the Japanese can be identified immediately with their Asian facial features. And incidentally, a while back under President Bush, Senior Bush, not Little Bush, the U.S. government supposedly tried to make reparations to the families that were interred in the prison camps and provide them some financial remuneration. But most of the people that were put in the camps were dead and gone. Well, I know everybody believed the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. But see, what I'm trying to show you is this. It's about theft. It's about destroying people's lives. Okay? It's about building up power. It's about doing things without anybody questioning you. All right? It's about all of that. But the average person can't get it. And the reason they can't get it is because of masterpieces like John Ford's December 7th, 1941. So basically, get rid of the Japanese culture and the Japanese population, and that will occur in the United States. Now remember, Hawaii is not yet considered a state of the United States, but nevertheless it's going to preview what they want to do in America in about a year from now after the so-called bombing of Pearl Harbor.
Brought many changes, and in no small measure served to further complicate the already complex life of the Japanese in Hawaii. As though to permanently erase their relationship with the homeland, they wiped out or removed every vestige of the written Japanese word. Closed are the language schools. Empty and boarded up the Shinto temples. Gone the flag of the rising sun. This young American Japanese gave the best illustration that over Hawaii, the rising sun had begun to set. Thus, war came to Hawaii, USA. The Aloha Tower, once the symbol of welcome and hospitality, now stands clad in weird war paint. No longer do luxurious liners bring vacation-bent tourists to these once happy isles. The liners, too, have gone to war. No longer is Waikiki Beach the sun-kissed playground of the Pacific. Barbed wire has changed its face, too. Now...
See? Imprison the population. Most likely so no one could get out the word that nothing happened there, except they willfully exploded USS Arizona and sank it. Other than that, it was just a typical day in Hawaii.
Twilight, the city streets are empty and deserted. Blackouts start each day promptly at dusk. Well, you may crow, Mr. Tojo. You've done a good job of stabbing in the back. You've darkened our cities. You've destroyed our property. You've spilled our blood. Our faith tells us...
Okay, so now this is creating the false dichotomy. And by that I mean the bad guys versus the good guys. The Japanese are bad. The Americans are good. In fact, when I grew up, because I grew up in the shadow of World War II, there was a saying, and I don't want to get too involved with the saying, but it basically was something like this: the only good is a dead. Well, anyhow, I don't want to say it specifically because it could be offensive, but the only good, J, is a dead J. Now that was ingratiated into my mind. I'm sorry to tell it to you. Now I'm a product of my generation. Is anybody listening to this is a product of their generation? And even vestiges of this still remain in some people. But the truth of the matter is, nothing happened there except the sinking of the Arizona and some making of propaganda films and the instigation and creation of hysteria. So this is going to end on kind of a dramatic rah rah rah, the bad guys versus the good guys, and the good guys are going to win. Now remember, it's shown during the war and it's shown for propaganda purposes to rally support for the war, because anytime there is a war in the United States, basically speaking, anyone who speaks a word against the war is usually silenced or made fun of or perhaps imprisoned.
But to all this treachery, there can be but one answer, a time-honored answer. For all they that take the sword shall perish with the sword.
Okay, now keep in mind this comes from the Department of the U.S. Navy, and it's fully 100% a propaganda film. And its director was John Ford, who I am saying to you up front is a warlock conjuring up the powers of the devil and demonic forces to convince everybody of the horrors of horrible people called the Japanese in 1941, 42, 43. Now, you can do with this as you want, but I'm telling you, nothing happened at Pearl Harbor except for some smoke bombs, a couple fires lit, confusion created, whistles going off, and the intentional sinking by controlled demolition of the USS Arizona. There were no bombers dropping bombs at Pearl Harbor. Come around. Let go of the lies. Let go of the propaganda. Let go of the false history that you've been told. You know what? You will live a better life. But I will say this, it's a lot more lonely, because you can hardly speak to anyone about anything. Now that's why I make videos, because I know there are some of you out there who know what I'm saying, and you're right there too. And so in a way, this establishes a friendship. In a way, this gives me some comfort. In a way, this gives me some hope that you're out there and you're listening and you're watching. God bless you, and thank you very much for tolerating me and watching this series. This concludes the series on John Ford, Warlock, December 7th, 1941. End of video.